The old man moved with slow deliberation up the mountain path. How old he felt as he climbed. But it was not just his age that made this pilgrimage so hard. There was also the lingering pain of her loss that had, at first, almost killed him. How long it had been, he did not know. One day seemed very much like another now. All he knew was that every night he still woke weeping in the lonely, long darkness. He could not live without her. He must find her again. He bowed his head and shut his eyes to block out everything around him. All his life there had been people to do his bidding. They were with him now, anticipating his every need. As a son of the emperor, he had led a life of privilege. But for over 40 years, since he had ascended the throne, there had been more than privilege. His word had been law. Whatever he had wanted, it was his by right, for he possessed the mandate of heaven. He was the son of heaven, but no longer. His own son now held the throne. It had been a simple choice: relinquish the throne or die. A simple choice. But why had he chosen life when she was dead? She who he couldn't live without. And yet here he was, still living. He had been afraid of death, and so had chosen life. A life without her, a life without hope. Tears came to his eyes as he remembered their life together. How beautiful she had been. Her eyes had shone with pleasure, and her soft, round, perfumed body moved with such grace as she danced before him. The dance of the rainbow skirt and feathered coat had been his gift to her. Her embroidered, tasselled cape swirled, and her sleeves billowed. She was his fairy maiden. How he had loved her. For 11 years they had been everything to each other. Nothing else had mattered. Others might blame her for the troubles that followed, but it was all intrigue on their part. She was pure and without guile. She had been very young, that was true, but she had loved him with a deep and abiding love, just as he had loved her, still loved her. They had plotted against her and sought to poison his mind against her, but he had never stopped loving her. And yet, in the end, even with all his power, he had been unable to save her. He had seen her die, he had seen them kill her, and he had chosen not to accompany her on that last great journey into the afterlife. He had chosen life, but he had found that life without her was no life at all. So he had resolved to find her again. They would meet again. He was determined. He had gone to the place of her death, but her body could not be found. It had been trampled into the dust under the hooves of many horses. That was why he was making this pilgrimage to the summit of Mount Ermei. He had been climbing for 5 days now, but at his pace he would still not reach the golden summit until evening. It would be the 7th day of the 7th lunar month, the festival of the cowherd and the weaver maid, and he would renew his pledge of eternal love to her once more. He moved slowly and was very tired, but he had refused to be carried. He would show his sincerity by climbing every step. Then he would make his offerings. Many valuable things he had brought with him, beautiful things and also powerful things. The army had blamed her, but they were wrong. It had been those monks. It was their fault. They had hated her. He could see that now. He should have had them all killed then. The memory of their insolence was a deep well of bitterness. When he came to the throne, they had promised to pray for him, just as before they had prayed for Wu Zetian, his grandmother. Her rule had been glorious, and for many years his kinship had also flourished and prospered. They would come to call him Ming Huang, the brilliant emperor. The power and glory of the Tang-dynasty had never been greater than in his reign. But the monks had grown jealous of her influence, and so had withdrawn their support from him. They had stopped praying for him. At first he had sent them friendly words and many gifts, but they had disapproved of her. They said it was not proper that he had forced his son to divorce her so that he could marry her. But hadn't he sent her away to the monastery after the divorce? Tai Jin, utmost truth she had been called then. For 5 long years she had languished there, but their love had been the utmost truth. Why hadn't they understood? Their love was eternal. Nothing on earth or in heaven could keep them apart, like trees with intertwined branches. But they kept insisting he cast her aside. He refused, for she was his Gui Fei, his most precious princess consort, and so these wretches prayed for his downfall. The traitor An Lu Shan had answered their prayers. Unimaginable death and chaos followed. But he had had his revenge on those plotting monks who thought it was their right to dictate to an emperor. Before the end, he had sent soldiers to sack their monastery and bring away all their treasures. These treasures and other tokens he would now offer to her as a sign of his continuing love. Other monks accompanied him now, monks from Chengdu. He had thought they would be safe from the rebellion there, but only he had reached the beautiful brocade city, and there he had grieved for her night and day. They had brought him lychees. When he saw them, he wept openly. By relay rider, over many leagues, he had commanded them to be brought to the palace for her delight, and now the sight of them broke his heart. These monks had promised him that they would help, but he didn't trust them. He needed them to intercede on his behalf, but he didn't trust them. They carried the offerings and said they would petition heaven to allow him to find her again, his Gui Fei. Like 2 birds they were to descend to heaven, but he did not trust them. After the ceremony of offering, he would order his guard to kill them all. That would be best. For already he could read the desire in their eyes. The offerings that had come from the sacked monastery excited them too much. 1 or 2 in particular were not to be trusted, so-called scholar monks, who desired power and influence beyond their station, but he knew how to deal with them. Finally, the summit was in view. The setting sun was turning the sky to blood. His heart beat faster. He was sure he could feel her love drawing him on, his most beloved Gui Fei. He would find her again soon. The old man staggered up the mountain path and disappeared into the darkening night.